In this video, we are going to be looking at a trap from the Sicilian Defense. But before I get into the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe. I release weekly content and you wouldn't want to miss out. Anyways, enjoy the video. As I mentioned earlier, this trap occurs in the Sicilian Defense, specifically the Najdorf variation. This opening starts with e4, c5, knight f6, d6, d4, c takes, knight takes, knight f6, knight c3, and a6. Both players are just playing logical moves, developing. This opening is, in fact, extremely popular. You'll see it a ton in your games. It's something to keep in mind. We see bishop to g5. Now, this is where the theory strays a little bit. The idea is that white can take and possibly disrupt black's structure with e takes or g takes. There'll be doubled pawns. Black typically doesn't really care about this because white will not have the bishop pair anymore. However, in the line we'll be looking at, black plays e6. Now this is not exactly the best move because as we saw earlier, this knight on f6 was not actually pinned, and now the knight is pinned, and this will come into play later on. We see f4. This threatens e5, and the idea after e5 is that this knight will be pinned and black will lose material. We see knight b to d7. This defense, we can see that now black should be able to take, and this knight is reinforced here. We see bishop to c4. This will come into play later on. We can see that the bishop and the knight team up, and there could be possible sacrifices later on in the game. Black plays a very natural move, b5, just trying to kick away this bishop. And now, as I mentioned earlier, we see bishop takes e6, the first major sacrifice in the game. Now we see f takes and knight takes. Now we can see this knight here on e6 is very annoying. It does many things. Number one, it attacks the queen. Number two, it attacks the bishop. So we see a fork. And number three, indirectly, imagine if this queen were to move off the diagonal, then we would see knight c7, and there would be a fork. So this is sort of like a triple fork. And we can see that white is down material, however, they have lots of compensation with this really aggressively placed knight. If we see queen to e7, then knight c7 just wins on the spot, bags a rook. Another popular move that you see is queen to a5. However, there is knight takes. Doesn't matter how black takes. For example, rook takes, and now this pawn is hanging. And now white should have enough compensation for the position to be equal. However, the best move is queen to b6. Now we can see the queen is defending this important c7 square and guards the d6 pawn. We see knight d5, and the idea is after takes, there is queen takes, and now the rook is hanging in the corner. Additionally, white indirectly attacks some of these weak light squares. This could come into play later on in the game. However, first, black throws in a check with queen to e3. The idea is that white must move their king, for example, king to f1. However, now we can see that this rook is hanging, and since black chose to move their queen all the way from the queen side, the pieces will start falling. This starts with knight to b6. This is a purely defensive move. Here, if we go back a move, we can see that there are two main threats. Rook is hanging in the corner, and knight c7 picks up the rook too. So, black plays knight to b6, which attacks the queen while also defending the rook. However, as I mentioned earlier, there is knight c7 check, king d7, queen f7, and as we can imagine, the position is getting very, very dangerous for black. The only move is queen c6. Now, generally, when you're in positions like this, where you only have one move and pretty much everything is forced, likely what is going to happen is you're going to get checkmated. However, first we see knight d5. The idea is if takes, there's queen takes, and a nice little fork here. However, the most common move that you'll see is queen takes e4, and now black is hoping that they can simply trade off the queens and in the end be up material and hold the endgame. However, white doesn't want to trade queens and plays queen c7. King takes d5 is the only move. However, this is still completely losing for black, as you can imagine, with rook d1, king e6, and rook e1. And we can see queen is pinned to the king, and now the position is completely lost. However, the trap doesn't end there. We see queen takes e1, king takes e1, and h6. Now you might be wondering here, why doesn't black just resign? I mean, they're obviously completely lost. Their queen is gone, and their position is in a complete mess. However, material-wise, it's about equal in fact, because we can see rook for rook, bishop for bishop, and black has knight, bishop, and rook for queen. Now, material is completely equal. However, as we can see positionally, white has a pretty secure king that can pretty much move wherever it wants, and black has a pretty weak king position. And as we can imagine, positionally, as I mentioned earlier, it's completely lost, and the winning line starts with f5. And now we can see that for once, black does in fact have many options. Earlier in the game, most of the moves were completely forced. However, here, black has three options. They can play king to d5, king to e5, and king to f5. Now imagine they play king to f5. The idea is that, number one, black's knight is hanging here, so now black wants to take the bishop and probably hold the position in the endgame. However, white doesn't allow that and plays queen to f7. Now this puts even more pressure, giving up further material to look to checkmate. And now we can see black has many options here. The best move is king to d5, refusing the free material. However, if they do take with king to g5, there is a forced checkmate in 2, starting with h4, g4, and queen f3. And now we can see on move 24 of this trap, white has finally finished black off. Now you might be wondering, where did black go wrong? Let's go back a couple of moves. The trouble here starts with bishop takes h6. This is the first big sacrifice of the game. However, even here, the position is still about equal, and if black continues to play the best moves, they should have about an equal position. However, they do make some incorrect moves right here. This is the first big blunder and probably results in black losing the game. Queen to e3. Looks like a very appealing move at first, just throwing in a check and forcing white to possibly move their king to d1 or f1. However, it is very important that here black keeps their queen on the king side and holds this square, this square, this square, and this square. So we can see here that no matter what white plays, for example, king to f1, now the queen side is significantly weaker, and to be honest, black didn't really achieve anything since it's not like black is going to be checkmating white anyways. There are no more checks here, and now it is completely losing for black. Things only get worse right here and here. So as we can see, black is making small decisions that are making their position worse and worse. Now here is where you'll see that black immediately loses with his pin, and the position is horrible. Things are really falling apart. So these small decisions, followed by white making forcing moves, resulted in a big loss for black. And as I mentioned earlier, about here, the position is still about equal. However, the first big mistake is after f5, black chooses to play king takes f5, taking even more free material. And now things only get worse after king takes g5. And as we saw earlier, there's a forced checkmate in 2, h4, king g4, and queen f3. Now, the main thing that you want to take away from this is that, first of all, you want to always calculate when you're taking what looks like free material. Secondly, you don't want to go excessive and continue to take free material when your position is terrible. Typically, if you have a bad position, you need to focus on making positional improvements, and that will result in you hopefully winning the game. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching.